Hazel always knew there was something special about her cat Mooney, but she's still shocked when Mooney opens his mouth to tell her he's just had a vision. An ancient evil has awoken after centuries of sleep, and only one man can stop it, the legendary warrior Beowulf. Unfortunately, it's been over 1,000 years since he slayed a dragon, and he's been reincarnated as this guy. His name is Victor, and he's more unemployed millennial slacker than mighty warrior. Go to monarchpublishing.net for a free sample comic.
Hi everybody, I'm Grant.
I'm Angie.
This week we're talking about Batman Black and White. So I was kind of surprised because Angie's favorite character is Batman, and she told me that she never read this. So I wanted her to read it, and I thought we would turn it into a video.
Or couples counseling.
Is that what this is?
Yeah.
I remember when they announced this, everybody's jaws just dropped because nobody had ever seen like this many legendary creators in one place before. And everybody was asking, how did they get all these people together? Some of the artists dated their drawings for like 1994, and this didn't come out until 1997. So I'm guessing part of the reason why they were able to get so many legendary creators is because it had super loose deadlines.
The illustrations through this book were fascinating because a lot of them felt really chaotic would be a word.
Yeah, so that's going to be a common theme when we're talking about this book. I don't know about you, but I wrote in my notes a lot of times man, the art is amazing, but this story does nothing for me. Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of good stories in here, and then there's a few in there that I was like, well, that was fun. But it didn't leave a massive impact. But there are a few in there that, I have a lot of notes.
We wrote down what our favorite story was, and now we're going to reveal. Mine was Two of a Kind by Bruce Timm.
Mine was Bent Twigs by Bill, and I'm going to butcher this man's name. Sienkiewicz. Okay,
cool. Okay, so that's interesting. I thought for sure we were going to have the same one.
Nope.
So Perpetual Mourning, I was not familiar with this artist. He seems to be more of an indie guy, more of a artsy creator, which is one of the things that I think is cool about this. They got some indie, the more artsy guys to do art and writing for them. This story, I wasn't real crazy about. To me, it reminded me of NCIS, like one of those police procedural TV shows.
So I liked this story because it kind of feels like, a lot of comics, there is a resolve, and there wasn't a resolve with this.
Yeah, that was cool.
And I imagine, and we can get into this,
these are 8-page stories. So,
yeah.
So yeah, so sometimes they're not going to do the traditional story arc.
Right. But that's what I kind of liked about it, because it really does tie in with, I'm sure, in the history of Batman in Gotham City, there's been some stuff that's fallen through the cracks even through Batman. And so it kind of just leaves another, mental scar on him, so.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on this. How did you feel about the art in this?
I liked it.
You can definitely tell it's non-mainstream.
Yeah,
art, which
for sure.
I think that's one of the cool things about this comic book. The art in this is not as much my cup of tea, but there's so many different artists. It's just cool to see all the different interpretations, even if something isn't your cup of tea. So the next story is Two of a Kind. This is the one that I chose as my favorite. It was written and illustrated by Bruce Timm. I did want to mention that Todd Klein does the letters in this. I think if you ask most people who the best letterer in the industry is, it's Todd Klein. So it goes without saying, Bruce Timm is an amazing artist. I really thought this was a beautiful story. It's neat because it's way darker than anything you would see in Batman the Animated Series.
Right.
And it was kind of cool to see Bruce Timm flex those muscles. And of course, I know Bruce Timm likes drawing sexy girls, which he doesn't get the opportunity to do.
I think Jessica Rabbit is calling.
I mean, my only complaint with this story is that I felt like it was kind of restricted by the 8-page mandate.
Yeah.
Like, he could have done, like, a full comic book of this.
I mean, that's one of those. I mean, yeah, he's part of Batman's rogues gallery, but he's also Bruce Wayne's best friend. And, like, that's a loss that Bruce / Batman always has to deal with when he's coming up against Harvey Dent. Like, this was somebody he was close to, you know, considered a friend. And, like, in this story, you almost get him back, but it's like Two-Face is just right under the surface, you know. So it's a repeated loss for Bruce.
I felt like the point of the comic book was kind of how much of that dark side was in Harvey Dent before his face was deformed. I mean, was he always Two-Face? And he just, like, hid that side of his personality. Something else interesting about this book, about this story, I think Batman only shows up in the very last panel.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that was, like, he does kind of seem out of place. I wonder if that was, like, an editor's mandate. Like, you can't tell an entire story in a comic book called Batman and not have Batman show up. Something else interesting about this story, it's on an 8-panel grid. I think I read in an interview with Bruce Timm, he said that he did that. I think he liked the restriction of having an 8-panel grid because he feels like when you're a little bit restrained, you tend to be more creative. The next story is called The Hunt. This is Joe Kubert. I can't say enough good about Joe Kubert's art. I think he's an absolute master of comic book art. I mean, if this tells you anything about Joe Kubert made me not want to become a comic book artist. I'm not joking. I took a correspondence course from Joe Kubert, and he put a piece of tracing paper over my drawings, and he showed how the drawings were supposed to be. And, like, seeing how effortlessly he could make my drawings a million times better, I was like, I don't have it in me to be a comic book artist.
Thanks. The art is beautiful. I found this story lacking.
That's exactly what I wrote. So Joe Kubert, we're going to see a couple artists in here who are great artists, but for some reason they insist on writing the stories that they draw. And it's like, no, man, you don't need to do that. Just draw it. The thing that I love about Joe Kubert's art is I love, like, the body language.
Yeah.
Like, look at, like he says so much emotion. Like, just with, like, the pose. I'm sorry,
the story didn't, like, have a
it's
massive
a very
impact.
It's a very generic jewel thief, Batman stopping a jewel thief kind of story. Yeah, right. Joe Kubert is an amazing artist, mediocre writer.
Yeah.
We have Petty Crimes. This is another legend, Howard Chaykin. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He did a comic book in the 80s called American Flag, which was an influence on The Dark Knight Returns. I liked this story. So I described this story as being Batman versus Michael Douglas's character in Falling Down. Would you agree with that?
I imagine Batman deals with these kind of people. Somebody who thinks they can do a better job than him.
It's basically somebody who goes crazy because he's just annoyed with all the little annoyances in life.
And I mean, trying to put myself in that story, I imagine Gotham is not the greatest.
You can tell that this was made in the 90s because it has the prerequisite cappuccino joke. Right. Like, was cappuccino the avocado toast of the 90s?
Maybe. I will say the art is really amazing. I love the shading.
I don't know how he got these textures. I don't know if he had, like, an early version of Photoshop, and that's how he was getting these textures. I pray to God he wasn't sitting there with a pen getting all those little dots. This comic book is also on a grid, like a different type of grid, where they repeat the same kind of structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the conclusion is kind of exactly what you would expect. Like, Batman says, hey, you don't get the right to, like, judge these people. And he's like, well, how does that make me any different than you?
Right.
And it's the age-old question with Batman. But I liked it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
So next is The Devil's Trumpet, written by Archie Goodwin, another legend. Jose Muniz. I wasn't familiar with his art, but I really, really like it.
Mm-hmm.
He has like a lot of really super dark shadows, a lot of like super bright whites, not very much gray.
So the reason I just like this story because it does sort of, is it a cursed object? Is it all in everybody's mind? Like, about it. I mean, the reason I like Batman in general is it's so much psychology, and I find that fascinating.
It's a story that kind of gets by on like its atmosphere, and like you were saying, some of like the psychological questions.
Mm-hmm.
So then we have issue 2 with a cover drawn by Frank Miller. To me, this is cool just to see how much Frank Miller's style has changed since he did The Dark Knight Returns. It's always raining in whatever world Frank Miller lives in.
I mean, he sure does. He would love England if he lived there, I guess.
But he would probably think they were sissies.
Probably.
So then we have another legend. Well, the name of the story is Legend, and it was written and drawn by a guy named Walt Simonson, who's a legend. The art, I think, was really cool. Another really geometric artist. I think he was trying to contrast the brights and darks, but I would have liked it if the bright area had a little bit more shadow. This panel in particular, I feel like it needs some shadow.
Well, I mean, maybe what he was trying to convey is like the future is, bright and white and sterile.
Yeah.
The
opposite of Batman.
Yes.
But then at night, everything goes back to being grim and gritty.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I got from this is that he's kind of being told as a story in this again, very like this future that is very controlled, very clean.
He's like the Robin Hood.
Yeah, is it like
Robin Hood or King Arthur or any like legends people tell themselves.
Right. And I actually skipped past the last page accidentally, and then I saw it again, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. Because he isn't a legend in this world. Right. He's there.
So it's kind of ambiguous whether or not he exists or if he's just a story.
Mm-hmm. Till like
the last panel.
Right. And I really liked that. Hopefully Batman shows up to maybe like shake things up in the end. But I did like that.